Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Hope you had a good week, good Halloween. Okay, I've had this one on the back burner and I have decided to finally do this story. It just feels like the right time, just sometimes you gotta feel some things out. I've been on this thing for almost 2 years. Good Lord. Yeah, been doing this for almost 2 years now. Really fast. Anybody who is new, hello, welcome. Thank you for making my video about Marcella just up. Thank you so very, very much. I've been really enjoying this and I'm having a little bit of a traction and it's fun and I'm excited for this. And thank you so much for anybody who is new here. Hello, hi. Okay, anyway. Okay, today we will talk about a pioneer in the feat of female pilots and an even bigger feat as a female black pilot, Bessie Coleman. Let's get started. And before we get going, Black Mermaid Magic. My mom got me this shirt when the Little Mermaid black version came out. I didn't have any shirts that are like plain themed because I tried to make sure that my shirts are kind of themed to who I'm talking about. But I couldn't find any plain shirts, so I put on a Black Mermaid Magic shirt. Gosh dang it. Okay. Anyway, Elizabeth Coleman was born on January 26, 1892 in Atlanta, Texas. Always called Bessie, she was the 10th of 13 children to George and Suzanne Coleman. Of their 13 children, 9 survived into adulthood, and this was unfortunately typical at the time. Now, important to know is that when her parents were born, they were enslaved, as they were born before the Civil War. So because of that, her parents could not read or write, and they both had very big Native American heritage, mainly Choctaw and Cherokee heritage. So with this in mind, when Bessie was born, it was when America was in full Jim Crow law era. The era beginning in 1877 and ending in 1965. Jim Crow laws, segregation. It has not been outlawed for very long. When Bessie was about 2, the family moved to Waxahachie, Texas, where they lived as sharecroppers, basically where a landowner gives a tenant full use of the land in trade for the crops they grow on that land. Bessie's childhood, even though it was in the segregated Jim Crow era, was a very happy one. She spent her days playing outside in the family's lawn that was lined with red and yellow roses, and on Sundays attended church. She began going to school in 1898, around 6 years old. She would walk 4 miles each day to her segregated school, where she was taught arithmetic, reading, and writing, and established herself as an outstanding math student, and where she learned that she loved to read. We love that about her. I love reading. I'm a birdworm. I'm a bookworm. I also am a bird. I do like birds. Anyway, note, 2 years before, in 1896, the Plessy v. Ferguson Supreme Court ruling was made, and the doctrine of separate but equal was coined. This basically meant that whites and blacks still should be separate, but say a black school needs to be on an equal playing field of opportunities as a white school. This thought process was complete bull, because even though it had been 2 years since that ruling, Bessie School was a 1-room, wooden building that taught grades 1 through 8 and had a grand total of 1 teacher. All those grades and all those students. Separate but equal, baby. Can't tell you how much that grind my freaking gears. Bessie's life right now is good. Yes, she worked in the cotton fields every year, but things are good. Till 1901, when her father George decided to leave his family. We're not 100% sure why he left. One theory is that since he was both Native American and black, and there was like a lot of hatred and violence and lynchings going on in the South, especially in Texas, so he kind of wanted to dip out of there. On one hand, I really don't blame him. And since George had Native ancestry, he could find safety in Oklahoma, and he would enjoy full rights as a citizen because at this point, Oklahoma was still an Indian territory. So he left family stayed. Don't know why the family didn't go with him. That's all I could find. So Bessie's mom, Susan, suddenly at the age of 45 is a single mom, and at this time, that's not good. At this time, most Black households were led by and were expected to be led by men. So she became a cook and housekeeper for a white couple. Growing up and learning, Bessie was intrigued by the accomplishments of Black people in history, those like Harriet Tubman, and her favorite bedtime story she would read to her sisters was Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was written by a Black abolitionist. She continued to work when the cotton harvest came around. This made schools shut down because everyone, Black, young, and old, participated, because at this point, that's kind of the only way they can make money. When she completed school, she got work as a laundress, doing collecting, washing, and delivering the laundry to patrons. All the while, she wanted more opportunities. Quote, "I wanted to find a bigger life. I want to amount to something," end quote. And for a brief time, she did. Bessie was accepted in the Missionary Baptist Church School in 1904 when she was 12 on a scholarship. And when she turned 18 in 1910, she dipped into her savings and enrolled at Oklahoma Colored Agricultural and Normal University, now simply called Langston University in Langston, Oklahoma, but only stayed a semester till her money ran out and she had to go back home. At the age of 23 in 1915, following the Great Migration or Black Migration North, Bessie moved to Chicago, Illinois, where she moved in with her two brothers on the south side of Chicago. There she worked at the White Sox barber shop as a manicurist and actually became one of the most popular manicurists in Black Chicago. Now, since barbershops and nail gals are always a hotbed for gossip, she heard all the crazy stories from pilots who were flying during war times in World War I. Now, one of her brothers, John, had served in the army in France during World War I, specifically the 370th Regiment of the Illinois National Guard, which was one of the few African-American regiments that served in combat during World War I, and the 370th is the only regiment commanded entirely by Black officers during the war. How had I not heard about this? How had I never heard of this? All I'm going to say, these men were the Tuskegee Airmen of the ground. I'm going to link the U.S. Army article all about this in the description. For the love of everything, read that. Educate yourselves. John, brother, awesome. Thank you for your service, my dude. But was kinda a complete jerk. One day, John showed up drunk and began taunting his sister, Bessie, about her job. And this was apparently something he did often. He teased his sister about how women in France had more opportunities. He said that Black, quote, "women ain't never going to fly. Not like those women I saw in France." Apparently this was Bessie's last straw, because this lit something inside of her. And she replied, smiling, quote, "That's it. You just called it for me," end quote. She was now determined to prove him wrong. So she took up a second job at a chili parlor, which was a thing mainly in Texas, but had moved outside of Texas and was basically an ice cream parlor, but instead of ice cream, they had chili. She was a restaurant manager at this chili bar, and she wanted to save money in hopes of becoming a pilot. On January 30th, 1917, she married Claude Glenn, who was 14 years older than her, but the marriage didn't last long, and they separated soon after. This woman applied to every freaking flying school she could find, but as you can guess, was rejected because she was not only a woman, but she was also a Black woman. I mean, we are in a time when women don't have the right to vote, and I also found a couple of ads for women. Look, all I'm gonna say, apparently spaghetti in a can will make you not a tired woman and a poor wife, because, you know, those are one and the same thing. You, woman, will stay skinny by smoking cigarettes, and don't worry, your throat will be protected from irritation and cough if you use their brand. And skinless sausages make the perfect Mother's Day present. Just save some for Dad. Oh, and let us not forget, around this time, Aunt Jemima is still kind of new. Your eyes are not messing with you. I did not put any filters on this. That was what the Aunt Jemima face looks like. Having zero luck, she thought that taking her brother's advice of the French could be a good option. Bessie was an avid reader of the Chicago Weekly Defender, and she had become an acquaintance or friend with the Defender's editor, publisher, and founder, Robert S. Abbott. He advised her to learn French and go overseas. He even publicized her request in the newspaper and received financial support from Jesse Binga. I really think that's his name, Binga, because Binga just makes sense to me, who founded the first privately owned African-American bank in Chicago, and from the Defender itself. On November 9th, 1920, Bessie got her passport, got a tourist visa for a year, and on November 20th of that year, boarded the SS Imperator and set off for France. When she arrived, she enrolled in France's most famous flight school, the
École d'Aviation des Frères Caudron-at-le-Crotoy,
or Caudron Brothers Aviation School at Le Crotoy in northern France, which was founded and run by the Caudron Brothers, who were pioneers in aviation manufacturing and had built the World War I planes. At this school, she completed a 10-month course that included learning how to do banking, tailspins, and loops. The pumpkins just keep moving. Now, as you can guess, planes at this time weren't the F-16s or 777s of today. These were planes made out of basically wood, paper, some glue, tape if it's there, an engine, and a propeller thingy. And these things were fragile, and flying them was dangerous. And Bessie saw these dangers firsthand when she saw a student pilot killed in an accident. She said, quote, "It was a terrible shock to my nerves, but I never lost them. I kept going," end quote. She learned to fly a Newport Type 82. This plane was a 27-foot long biplane with a 40-foot wingspan. This thing was fragile, and she had to inspect every part of it every time she flew. To make things even more dodgy, check this out that I found out. Oh my God. There was a seat for the student and one for the instructor. This plane, had no steering wheel and no brakes. Oh no, this plane was controlled by a big stick that would make it go up and down, and a rubber bar for the feet would make it go left or right. And to stop the plane, you land, then drag a metal skid attached to the tail to slow to a stop. Is that any safer than Boeing? I don't know. But at least you have on Boeing planes enclosed roof and some wine. Again, is it any more than what Boeing does? After her training, she took the qualifying test for a pilot's license from the famous Fédération Aéronautique Internationale World Air Sports Federation, or FAI. This organization was at the time the only organization whose license recognition gave a pilot the right to fly anywhere in the world. When she passed that test on June 15th, 1921, Bessie Coleman became the first Black woman and first Native American to earn an aviation pilot's license. And became the first Black person and self-identified Native American to earn an international aviation license from the FAI. In September of 1921, she sailed back to America, pilot's license in hand, just shy of her 31st birthday. Happy birthday to me. When Bessie got back home, holy crap, she was a media sensation. When she returned to New York, she was greeted by reporters from several national African-American newspapers. The Associated Press announced her as a full-fledged aviatrix, said to be the first of her race. I get it, but still. She received a silver loving cup from the Broadway cast of Shuffle Along in honor of her achievement, who had helped launch the careers of Paul Robeson and Josephine Baker. This cut was not only a symbol of respect and admiration, but of compassion and recognition of Bessie's feat against the odds she and other African Americans faced day by day. Remember, at this time, commercial flying jobs were still a good decade away. So Bessie quickly realized that in order to make money as a civilian pilot, she needed to become what was called a barnstorming stunt pilot. But to do this successfully, and most importantly safely, she needed to advance her skills because this was a very competitive space. When she returned to Chicago, she fully thought, hey, sure, I may be black and a woman, but I have my pilot's license. Heck, it's an international one at that. There's no way I can't find an instructor to teach me. Well, after a good 5 months of searching, no one was willing to teach her. So in February of 1922, she went back to Europe. I don't mean to get upset when I talk about this time in American history, but when you hear stuff like that, the fact that she's still a woman and black, she still is denied training for pilots. Even though she has an international pilot's license from one of the top aviation places in the world. But because she's black and a woman, or a woman and black, can't help you there. Just really infuriates me. She spent the next 2 months in France doing an advanced aviation course. She then went to the Netherlands to meet up with one of the world's most distinguished aircraft designers, Anthony. I'm not saying I don't know how to pronounce this. I just want to make sure I pronounce this correctly. Yep, I'm right. Okay. She met with Anthony Fokker. Or Fokker. I don't know what it tickles my funny bone. After she met with him, she then went to Germany to visit the Fokker Corporation. Sorry. To visit the Fokker Corporation and got more training from former World War I flying aces. After that, she went back to the US and launched her expedition flying career. She barnstormed across the country, doing one-woman shows and appearing at local fairs and aviation days. She became known as Queen Bess and was massively famous for the next 5 years. She mainly flew Curtiss JN-4, Jenny, biplanes, but she also flew planes that had been Army surplus planes that were left over from the war. Now, on this next part, I know it sounds vague, but she did so many performances. I can't mention them all because her story is already a lot. I can't mention all of her performances. She performed at multiple air shows, including events that honored all Black veterans, including at a show honoring the 370th Infantry Regiment, the same regiment that her brother, John, the jerk that said, women in the U.S. can't fly planes, even though the French can. She did loop-de-loops, figure eights, plummeting to the ground before almost hitting it, before soaring back up into the sky. And I just like to imagine that Johnny John was eating his words. Stunt flying and hearing the cheers from electrified crowds was fun and all, but this was only part of Bessie's dream. Believe it or not, Bessie would often be criticized for her aspiring personality and flamboyant style. You know, she's not feminine enough, even though she flies freaking planes. You can't exactly do that in a dress and corset. However, on the other side, she quickly gained a reputation as a daring, skilled pilot that would stop at nothing to complete hard stunts. This can be good, but can also be dangerous. For example, in February of 1923, she was doing a show in Los Angeles, California in her newly bought, bright and shiny new military surplus Curtiss JN-4 plane. When she was taking off at around 300 feet off the ground, her plane stalled and crashed. She broke a leg and 3 ribs. She actually had to be forced to go to the hospital because she wanted to be patched up and continue the show. It took her several months to heal and 2 years before she could fly again regularly. And when she came back with a whole new sense of passion. Since Bessie was a woman and a Black woman, it's no surprise that she became a massive influence in segregated America. See, even air shows were segregated back then. They had to enter into these shows from a different entrance, and sometimes these were way in the back of wherever the event was. Bessie naturally did not like this and refused to fly unless conditions were equal for all attendees, refused to perform unless Blacks were allowed to use the same front entrance that whites did and could sit in the same seats as the whites could. She was a massive activist. Bessie was also just freaking awesome. One of the cool things that stunt pilots did back then was after a show, they would take these attendees up in their plane for a really freaking fun ride. And they would do these rides till dark. She was looked up to and admired by kids and especially girls. One of her admirers was Reeve Lindenberg, daughter of Charles Lindenberg. And if you don't know who that is, I can't teach you everything. Freaking Google it. Now, mind you, Reeve did become aware of her only after Bessie's death, but it still counts. She said, quote, "Bessie Coleman is one of my great heroes. She told people through her own aerial adventures that anybody could fly," end quote. Bessie saw aviation as a way to empower African Americans and dreamed of opening a flight school. She told The Defender in 1921, quote, "I shall never be satisfied until we have men of the race who can fly. We must have aviators if we are to keep pace with the times," end quote. When asked about opening a flight school, she said, quote, "Blacks should not have to experience the difficulties I have faced. So I decided to open a flying school and teach other Black women to fly. For accidents may happen and there would be someone to take my place," end quote. And remember those words. In the 1920s, she met Reverend Hezekiah Hill and his wife Viola. I've heard it's pronounced both ways. When they were on a speaking tour in Orlando, Florida. The couple treated Bessie like their daughter, and she opened up a beauty shop in Orlando with their help so she could earn extra money to buy herself another plane. On October 15th, 1922, Bessie did an awesome air show at Chicago's first airport, Checkerboard Field. 3 weeks after that, and with the assistance of Billboard critic columnist A.J. Jackson, who always gave her rave reviews, signed a contract to star in a movie, and it was to be financed by the African American Seminole Film Producing Company and was to be titled Shadow and Sunshine. She happily accepted the offer and hoped that this would help her advance her career and get the money she needed to open her flight school and also, to buy her another plane. People were hired, script was written, and filming was supposed to start on October 18th in hopes for a Christmas release date. Everything was going good. Everything's good. Until Bessie learned that the opening scene would require her to be in tattered clothes, walk with a walking stick, and have a pack on her back. Like, that's one of the most stereotypical white portrayals of a Black person you could do, to portray Bessie's character as an uneducated girl arriving in New York. And Bessie rightly said no. She told her friend J.A. that as she left, she said, quote, "No Uncle Tom stuff for me." And I'll put a picture up because you will understand why she says that. Now, this is where we start to not like J.A. anymore. He said in return to Bessie's not wanting to reinforce racial stereotypes, stabbed at her own humble beginnings in Texas, saying that her Southern dialect and mannerisms are still in her and that the woman replacing her on the movie was an experienced actress with unmistakable cultural and social status, which will be an asset to the company. Basically just said, hey, she's not educated enough to understand. To add insult to injury, Peter Jones, president of the Seminole Company, said that there was now a delay in production of the movie, quote, because of the temperament of that young lady who, after coming to New York at the expense of the company, changed her mind and abruptly left New York without notice to the director, end quote. Now there's a delay because she didn't want to be racial stereotyped. Having lost the movie contract and the prospect of money that came with it, Bessie continued to travel and do air shows, and that's when she went to California and broke her leg. When she broke her leg and was at the hospital, to ease her fans, she sent a telegram to her friends and fans saying, quote, "Tell them all that as soon as I can walk, I'm going to fly, and my faith in aviation and the useful of it will serve in fulfilling the destiny of my people isn't shaken at all." End quote. And like I said, she recovered and continued to do stunts in the sky. By April of 1926, Bessie was able to save up enough money to purchase another plane. Another Curtiss JN4 in Dallas, Texas. Remember, this is the same plane that she had her crash in 3 years earlier. Now, I'm not making assumptions, but seems like this type of plane isn't the most well-built plane. Mind you, yes, it is an Army surplus plane, and that means it's been either disposed or sold by the military because it no longer needs it. And used can sometimes be more reliable than new. I've learned that with cars. But seems to me that these are not that reliable of a plane. Or maybe because she didn't have enough money to buy top dollar used plane, that's why they weren't the best. I don't know. Point is, when she got this new plane, her publicity agent and mechanic, William D. Willis, flew this plane from Dallas to Florida in preparation for an air show. Test fly. Cool. Awesome. Always need to test fly or test drive. Always have to do that. What's not cool is that he had to make 3 emergency landings because the plane had been so poorly maintained. Being a very good friend, he told Bessie, her friends and family, that this was not a safe plane. And in turn, William and her friends and family basically begged Bessie to not fly this clearly unsafe plane. But this is Queen Bess, the daredevil Aviatrix. She can do anything. So she refused their pleas. On April 30th, 1926, Bessie and William were in Jacksonville, Florida, to prepare for an air show at Jacksonville's Field Day on May 1st. On this day, Bessie and William took the new plane for a test flight. William was in the cockpit and Bessie was in the back of the plane so she could study the field and spot good jump sites. At this point, the plane had climbed to 3,500 feet. Now, Bessie isn't all that tall, as you can tell by the photos. She was just 5'3". And if you look at these planes, the sides are pretty tall. Due to this and her need to look at the ground for the jump spots, she wasn't buckled into her seat. Witnesses say about 10 minutes into the flight, they saw the plane accelerate, then suddenly went into a nosedive, then a tailspin. At around 500 feet in the air, the plane had flipped upside down. Either at 500 or 2,000 feet, Bessie Coleman was thrown out of the plane and plunged to the ground, dying instantly on impact. She was 34 years old. William tried to gain control of the plane, but couldn't. When it plummeted to the ground, he died instantly on impact, his body pinned underneath the plane. The plane then exploded into flames. When the flames were put out, the plane was badly burned, but investigators were able to discover that a wrench used to do maintenance on the plane had gotten loose and jammed itself into the plane's control gears. This accident was tragic, but unfortunately not uncommon in the heyday of barnstorming. At this time, aircraft safety was just being addressed by Congress with the Air Commerce Act of 1926 that just began mandating that pilots and aircrafts be regulated. Bessie's death shocked and saddened friends and fans all across America, at least the black part of America. The mainstream press focused more on William's death because he was white and barely mentioned Bessie's death. Bessie's death was front page news on Black newspapers. There was a funeral service held in Florida before her body was sent back to her home in Chicago. At her funeral in Chicago, she had 22 pallbearers, and a good 10,000 people came to pay their respects. Among them was an attorney who won a major case in the U.S. Supreme Court about racial housing segregation in America, named Earl B. Dickerson, Congressman Oscar DePriest, and journalist Ida B. Wells, who was the mistress of ceremonies at Bessie's funeral. Viola Hill, that reverend's wife, she was an African-American musician, suffragist, and activist. She delivered Bessie's eulogy, speaking of Bessie's refusal to perform anywhere where Blacks were not allowed to attend. Baptist pastor Junius C. Austin delivered Bessie's funeral oration, saying of her, quote, "This girl was 100 years ahead of the race she loved so well, and by whom she was least appreciated," end quote. An African-American newspaper said about her loss that, quote, "Whether they take it or not, Miss Coleman has taught our women that they can navigate the air. And like all pioneers, she has built her own monument," end quote. Another newspaper in Dallas said that, quote, "There is reason to believe that the general public did not completely sense the size of her contribution to the achievements of the race as such," end quote. Bessie Coleman is buried at Lincoln Cemetery near Chicago. Before I move on, I know this is not the point, but can we just really quickly pause on her beloved Chicago Defender front page about her death? You're telling me you decided it was a really good idea to put "Girl slays mother brother with shotgun," "Probe murders in Alabama prison camp," and "Darrow traps witness in sweet case" right next to the famous Black Aviatrix dying in a plane crash. Just felt like I really needed us to take a minute to really take in this front page. Moving on. Her honors and legacy is a laundry list. Though she died young, her legacy and impact is profound to this day. Because of her love of learning, a public library in Chicago is named after her. Streets in Oakland International Airport in California, Tampa International Airport in Florida, O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, and Frankfurt International Airport in Germany are named after her. Aranda roundabout in the south of France leading to Nice Airport was named after her in 2016, and there are streets all over in cities and districts of Paris named after Bessie Coleman. Freaking perspective! Bessie Coleman Middle School in Cedar Hill, Texas is named in her honor. There are several Bessie Coleman Scholarship Awards that have been established for high school seniors that want careers in aviation. In 1995, she was a U.S. stamp. You know I want to be a stamp. She was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in 2001, inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame in 2006. In 2012, a bronze plaque was installed on the front doors of Pack School for Advanced Studies. This school is on the Jacksonville Airfield where Bessie's fatal flight was. In 2014, she was inducted into the International Air and Space Hall of Fame at the San Diego Air and Space Museum. On January 26, 2017, Google did a doodle of her on the 125th anniversary of her birth. She was on the American Woman Quarter in 2023. There's an elementary school in Oregon named after her. She's been in books, movies, plays. She's even been made into a Barbie doll in 2023, adding her to Mattel's Inspiring Woman series, and was featured on Comedy Central's Drunk History. And there's so much more, but that's all I can fit in right now. Her legacy goes beyond quarters and Hall of Fames. Bessie's strong-willed example has inspired dozens of pioneers in aviation, aeronautics, and eventually astronautics. The Bessie Coleman Aero Club was established in her memory in 1929 by William J. Powell, who along with Bessie is recognized as a pioneer aviator and civil rights activist, and was in the 370th Infantry Regiment that Bessie's brother was in. Just had to point that out. This club gave the Black community aviation opportunities, and many of the members who got these opportunities went on to join the Tuskegee Airmen and would make history in World War II as the baddest black people in the history of ever. I'm sorry, I love the Tuskegee Airmen. She inspired aviators like Janet Harmon Dragg, Cornelius Coffey, John Robinson, and she has inspired fellow black women to get into aviation like Willa Brown, who I have talked about and I'll tag her video up here, and Mae Jemison, the first black woman to become an astronaut and go to flippin' space. She said about Bessie, quote, "It's tempting to draw parallels between me and Miss Coleman, but I point to Bessie Coleman and say here is a woman, a being who exemplifies and serves as a model for all humanity, the very definition of strength, dignity, courage, integrity, and beauty," end quote. Going on to say that she felt, quote, "embarrassed and saddened that I did not learn of her until my spaceflight beckoned on the horizon. I wished I had known about her while I was growing up, but then again, I think she was there with me all the time," end quote. And in a very sweet way, Bessie was with Mae. When Mae left Earth, she took a picture of Bessie with her into space. Mae went farther than Bessie could have ever dreamed of. But in a way, that was Bessie's dream. Bessie Coleman wanted more for African Americans, especially women, and her intelligence, grit, determination, and strength continue to inspire black boys and girls to this day. She even spoke to a kind of sacrifice to move African Americans along in the aviation world. Quote, "The air is the only place free from prejudice. I knew we had no aviators, neither men nor women, and I knew the race needed to be represented along this most important line. So I thought it my duty to risk my life to learn aviation." There you go, Herstorians. Bessie Coleman. Have you heard of her? If not, please tell me in the comments what you like the most about her. I personally love that she was just this no-nonsense girl that was like, I'm not finding any opportunities here, so I'm gonna go to France because at least they don't care about if I have boobs and my skin color. Because I'm just gonna fly. That's just what's gonna happen. Really sad that she died as young as she was, because who knows what she could have done after all of that? Who knows what she could have done? My gosh. If you learned something today, and I sure really hope you did, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And while you're down there, please leave a friendly comment. I know that a lot of you guys are new and a lot of you guys watch myself and then move on. Please subscribe. I want to really grow this channel. Subscribe, because it's weird that you just come in and you creep in on my stuff and then just leave. It's weird. At least buy me some dinner first before you take all my stuff. Come on now. I will be back with another video, but until then, don't be well behaved. You just might make herstory. See you next time, guys.